In the creatively bankrupt industry that is Hollywood, there are two go-to methods or tried-and-true strategies studios employ when they need quick cash grabs. The first, most common thanks to Disney, is live-action remakes of beloved animated films. We're now seeing this trend leak elsewhere with How to Train Your Dragon getting a live-action remake. This remake doesn't even bother being a reimagining of the animation it's based on. It seems to be a one-for-one, shot-for-shot remake, but with live-action actors and CGI. Essentially, still animation, just a different kind. Why even bother? Studios do it because people somehow pull money out of nowhere to watch these, but that's a tangent for another time. The second strategy Hollywood loves is making unnecessary sequels to beloved films from decades ago, which brings us to Gladiator 2. From the first trailer, I didn't have much hope for this film. Why make a Gladiator sequel 24 years later? The original was an incredible complete film with no need for a continuation. Studios attempting sequels so many years later often produce mediocre results. The trailer didn't inspire confidence, but when reviews came out, many said it was solid. Curious, I decided to check it out. Overall, I thought the film was entertaining, but it felt like an unnecessary sequel primarily made to cash in on the popularity of the original. It retells similar story beats, but in a less compelling way. A diet version of the first movie's best moments. Some of the original's elements are replicated in a weaker fashion, though not terrible. It's just hard not to compare it to the original, which handled these aspects far better. That said, Gladiator 2 introduces new elements, some of which work well while others fall flat. On the positive side, the visuals are strong, delivering an over-the-top depiction of Rome. The action sequences are crisp and visceral. The protagonist, Lucius, gives a great performance, even with the enormous task of stepping into Maximus's shadow. However, his potential is undercut by odd writing choices. The plot itself is straightforward. Lucius, the son of Maximus, is sent away by his mother for safety after Maximus's death. Years later, the general of the Roman army attacks the area where Lucius is, leading to Lucius becoming a gladiator under Denzel Washington's character. Lucius harbors deep hatred for Rome, particularly after the general orders the death of Lucius's wife. This resentment fuels him through most of the film until an abrupt change later on. The turning point comes when Lucius confronts the general. He initially wants revenge, but ends up having a heart-to-heart moment that completely shifts his perspective. Suddenly, Lucius is willing to fight and die for Rome, embracing its glory, a decision that feels rushed and unearned. This rapid shift is jarring and undermines his character's arc. There are other narrative oddities, such as Lucius reconnecting with his mother after some success in the arena. Instead of a heartfelt reunion, he yells at her, saying the boy she sent away is dead, and ordering her to leave. These inconsistencies weaken the emotional core of the story, leaving it less impactful than it could have been. Tantrum, it's not a phase mom-type energy, and then only a few scenes later, he loves his mother and wants to do everything he can to save her. These are logical places for him to eventually get to, but it happens so quickly and abruptly that it feels like he impulsively latches onto something and is more than willing to let it go instantly. It makes sense narratively how he gets there, but it just happens too quickly in the movie. They don't build up to it, it just kind of happens. I do think there is some writing around the character that doesn't work. Lucius and the actor do a good job of making him a badass. He's a capable fighter and a good leader, and there's nothing in there that feels like an ass-pull moment. It all feels earned and sensible, but it just happens so quickly. Sometimes the writing betrays it. For example, there's a point where the general is no longer around, and Lucius tries to command the army by just sending a ring. He says, "Hey, I'm Lucius," but no one's ever met him or even knew he was alive. He wasn't using the name Lucius throughout the film or anything. Somehow the army decides to follow this mysterious guy because he has the general's ring. That's a bit of a leap. It's not Lucius or the actor's fault, that's just silly writing, in my opinion. It looks cool visually, but there had to be another way of getting to that point. Where it gets is cool, but how it gets there doesn't work super well. Overall, I think the film is solid, but two characters are just terrible. The emperors. The brother emperors are awful, so over the top and in your face that they become annoying. Every time they're on screen, it reminds you, this is a movie. It's like watching drama club monologues where they go so big and silly with it. Joseph Quinn, who plays one of the brother emperors, is a good actor, but it doesn't fit at all. For instance, during one of the battles, the iconic thumbs up, thumbs down scene, He channels the gods, dramatically pointing to the sky before bringing it down with a flourish. It's ridiculous, especially when compared to how great the villain was in Gladiator 1. The Brother Emperor's performances are laughable when they're not supposed to be. I understand they're meant to be incompetent and unserious because there's a bigger villain behind the scenes, but come on, there had to be a middle ground. Right now they kill the film's momentum. After a good scene, an emperor shows up yelling, "Remarkable, glorious, magnificent, good sir, what is your name?" Every scene they're in is the worst part of the scene. They're evil for the sake of being evil, with no real motivation. They're one-dimensional caricatures, not characters. It's underwhelming. There was potential to do something cool with them, but it was abandoned. There are a lot of characters in this movie, and they just didn't put the effort into these two. It's a movie with many characters you're meant to care about or root for, or even root against. But maybe it just fell to the back burner, and they didn't focus on developing the other characters as much. I do think the characters around them are good. Lucilla, though not in a major role, still does a good job of pushing things forward when she's there. She made the decision to send Lucius away, regrets it, and wants to fix things for the future. Her son is back in the fold, and she wants to deliver the Rome that was her grandfather's dream, while doing her best to help Lucius. Pedro Pascal plays General Acacius, and I think he does a really decent job, although I don't think he was given much to do. I thought he'd have a much bigger role, but he doesn't. Still, he balances his character well, the one who knows the emperors are failing and that they aren't feeding the people, but still has a duty to them. He does a good job with it, even though it's not amazing, just decent. Denzel Washington's character, Macrinus, is sometimes great, but at other times, not so good. The character has great plans, but suddenly decides to engage in a fight with someone who's clearly one of the best fighters in Rome, despite not having fought at all during the movie. You're left wondering, why would he do that? His entire persona revolves around planning and being steps ahead. Yet, here he is, engaging in a fight against someone he has no chance against. Macrinus does push everything forward by making Lucius a gladiator. He's a character who is slowly gathering power behind the scenes, crafting elaborate plans, scheming, and manipulating. He's clearly working toward big goals, and it's cool to watch, but I feel like that character just gets lucky too often. There's a whole monologue about being chosen by the gods, which is quite accurate. He was chosen by the writers to have plot armor, with things magically working out for him. Events just seem to fall into place in ways he could never have anticipated. I think Denzel Washington is a great actor, and Macrinus is a strong character, but there are moments when you can't help but think, really? For example, in a big spoiler scene, the way he gets Lucius to fight the general, which is part of the deal they made early on, happens entirely by accident. A random person overhears a plot that was happening behind the scenes, relays it to someone indebted to Macrinus, and suddenly, Macrinus has the opportunity to follow through on the deal. If the general wasn't doing that thing in the background, Macrinus would never have been able to deliver on the promise. But everything magically worked out for him. It's still cool to see things work out for Macrinus because it's a movie, and the plans he sets in motion will eventually come to fruition. I would have liked it more if his plans were due to his brilliant strategy, rather than just pure luck. Some of his plans, like gaining power, were well thought out, but towards the end, his plan becomes simple. Just kill and take charge. That's a straightforward strategy, not exactly a galaxy brain move. However, his earlier efforts to gather power were pretty smart. Overall, I didn't regret watching the movie. It's definitely enjoyable, but it feels like something the studio just threw together to generate money. The execs likely said, "We need something that'll make money. Let's make a Gladiator sequel." It wasn't about telling an amazing story. It was more about making a sequel to a beloved property. That said, it's not the worst thing in the world. At least it's fun. A lot of sequels that come out years later are just unwatchable. But this one still manages to be a fun movie. It borrows a lot from the first Gladiator, though it's not quite as good. If you're just in it for more gladiator combat, though, this one will still deliver. Thanks for watching, and see ya.